Where were you when you first heard the news, and how'd you take it?
I was actually home. So I was home. I was basically studying for a cloud certification, IT cloud certification, and my phone was going off. Usually, I have my phone off when I'm studying, but it just kept going on and on and on. And when I checked it, um, it was just a whole bunch of messages about, you see what happened to Kobe. Kobe, and then I just read one that said Kobe died, and the first thing I just closed my phone again. I was like, whatever, someone's playing around on the internet again. And when it kept coming on, and someone actually sent me a link, and it was a link. I think this was a link to I don't know if it was CNN or something like that. It was a credible news source, and I clicked it. And you know how a lot of times we talk about how people who get affected by when someone dies and they don't even know them. This was the first time I can actually say that a celebrity passed away and it actually got a reaction out of me. And I couldn't figure out why it had such, why I was actually reacting towards this. But as I started, digging a little deeper, and it just, it makes sense, because this is someone who essentially was indirectly a part of my life, a part of me growing up, especially as I started playing sports. Someone who I looked up to, a hero, pretty much. I can say this. I can tell you this. There's when I was younger, there's this comic book. There was this DC comic book. It was called the Death of Superman, and on the cover there's Superman all torn up and beat up, and there's Lois holding him crying. And I had an opportunity to get that book, and I couldn't read it. I didn't want to read it because I was like, there's no way I'm going to read a comic where my favorite superhero dies. And this is what happened in real life, and it hits me. That's why I had such a strong reaction to it, because in my mind, well, I'm sure in a lot of people's minds as well, who Kobe was a hero for, or a legend for. Well, he is a legend. But in my mind, he's supposed to live on forever. In my mind, he's always, young Kobe with the afro, and I'm just seeing him now, as an older person, as he progressed through life. But he was supposed to live forever, and what that kind of did for someone who, like me, who, a lot of times, especially when things are going good, not just me, I think this is most people, when things are going not good, but when things are just going according to plan, you feel invincible. It was a reminder of my mortality. It was a reminder of how quickly things can end without any indication or prior indication. Even worse, it happened when he wasn't, a lot of, there was no self, he wasn't doing anything wrong per se. He was literally doing his fatherly duties, taking his kid out to a basketball game to, what more precisely, to coach a basketball game. So he was doing what a father is supposed to do. And I think another thing that made this even worse is obviously the fact that his daughter was there, but the fact that he's doing all the right things, or he was doing all the right things, and bad things can still happen when you're doing all the right things, or when you're doing a good thing. But yeah, man, this was something that I never thought I'd react to a celebrity death, or someone who I didn't know who passed away. But yeah, this definitely got a reaction out of me.
I'll give you guys a timeline of my emotions and how I took the news. At first, I did not have the mama mentality on that Sunday. I didn't want to go to the gym. I actually made my mind up the night before. I'm not going to the gym. No way. But I conjured up some energy, went to the gym on a Sunday. Don't usually go to the gym on a Sunday. Came home and looked at my phone. I see a text from Fritz. It says, I think, what is it, Kobe? Question mark.
Yeah.
Out of context is as normal as normal guys, especially in this group chat. A lot of out of context text. I didn't understand what he meant. And then I looked down at my notifications because I haven't looked down at my phone for a while because I've been in the gym and I was driving home. So I didn't look down at my phone for a while. So I looked down at my phone and I checked the notifications and I see a notification from CNN, I believe. Maybe CNN, maybe Bleacher Report. Pretty sure it's CNN. So I see the report from CNN. Kobe has passed due to a helicopter crash or whatever it was. And immediately I just felt numb. I was supposed to meal prep for the week. Immediately I felt numb and shock. Went to Instagram. I saw all of the news pouring out and all of these celebrities giving their takes on it. And immediately you can see the impact he has on the nation in all realms, sports, entertainment, regular people. Everyone was impacted by the news. Everyone felt, like you said, a sense of connection because we saw Kobe grow up right in front of our eyes. We saw him come in at the age of 17 as the arrogant young kid coming from high school. Saw him grow up. Saw him go through his let's say his downsides of his career. He changed his personality. We see the evolution in himself, personality wise. His game, everything about him, we saw it mature right in front of our eyes. So we were able to get on that journey with him. And especially around the age group of where we're at and the younger kids, similar to LeBron, we've seen the trajectory of their lives and their career. We associate their career with their lives, even though that's not the case, but we've seen it.
Right.
I was
people between the ages of 13 and 35, I'd say 13, 35 to 38. That's Kobe is the person that we looked up to. He's essentially our Michael Jordan.
I wouldn't even say looked up to. It was just somebody we followed intently. Mm-hmm. Not everyone loved like Kobe. Kobe was polarizing. Mm-hmm. So he was just somebody we followed through and through. If you were born in the 90s, you probably caught the tail end of Michael Jordan's career. So you didn't feel the impact. You knew the impact. You encompassed all the impact he had mostly because of his shoes, if you're that young. And just word of mouth, you just hear everybody says Michael Jordan's the greatest. So we take it as value. But for Kobe, we actually saw his entire career. So I had a lot of things planned to do that day. I was going to do some creative things, some writing, some reading. But I couldn't conjure up the energy to do anything. I just sat on my chair, just scrolling through Instagram, just hoping for better news, hoping for a miracle. Yeah, because this is Kobe. Kobe fights through everything. Kobe fights through a separated shoulder, shooting a free throw, he played an entire game left-handed, broken fingers, torn Achilles, goes to the free throw line, shoots two, walks out to the locker room on his own with no type of help. So we've seen Kobe overcome tragedy. Like you mentioned, he's like a superhero. We expect a superhero to always come out on top. So I'm just searching the internet, just hoping for better news, or just hoping for clarity of news. And I saw someone that lives in Calabasas. She posted an Instagram story, and she saw firsthand where it was right up the hills of Calabasas, where we saw they actually saw the smoke from the helicopter. Yeah. It was on top of one of the hills, and she was there firsthand. Later on in the day, find out that it was one news came out. Our boy sent a screenshot. He's a lawyer. He's supposed to vet these things out, but he just sent it out to us, mentioning that it was all 4 daughters. Before we got that news, the news said Vanessa was not on board. Yeah, I raised my hand and did a fist pump, happy. I didn't think about the daughters at that time. I just assumed if Vanessa's not there, the daughters aren't there. So later on, we find out that it was.
I remember I saw some stuff that said it was Rick Fox, but To
All right,
your
we'll talk
point.
about that. We'll talk about that later. We'll talk about that a little later. I have something to say on that.
Okay.
So I find out that it was Gigi. Heart sunk to my stomach. Never felt this down about someone. I never felt this down, period. This entire week, I just felt down, just lethargic,
Yeah.
no energy. You're looking for answers, and you're sorry. You're just feeling sorrow. Even though these people have everything in the world, it still hits home. One, because Kobe was just starting his new career, his new life. He's only been retired for 2-3 years. So he finally had time to have true family time. And I hate people that said, "Oh, he lived a long life. It's 41 year. He lived a good 41 years." I'm like, what are you talking about? Because they're looking at it at the aspect of a sport.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
That's what I was
He's
gonna
a
say.
human. He's a human being. They say, "Oh, he experienced everything." No, he did not. He did not experience his Natalia.
His
His eldest daughter
even
is
his
17.
youngest daughter. Come on, he have a daughter who's under
Yeah, for
1 year old.
His eldest daughter is 17. He didn't even get a chance. It would have been this year or next year. He didn't even get a chance to send her off to prom, send her off to college. Never got that experience. And the toughest part about it was for the past 12 months or so, we've been seeing Kobe come into games, because Kobe mentioned in the podcast, it was a few months ago, he mentioned this, that for the longest, he wasn't watching basketball. He just distanced himself from basketball because he was so focused in on his businesses. But who brought him back to basketball?
His daughter did.
Gigi. Gigi brought him back to basketball. She was fans of Trey Young, Kyrie Irving, so they would sit and watch the games together. And then they started going to the games publicly. That's why we have all the famous images of Gigi and Kobe come to games. And Gigi was a fan of the sport, and everyone, all the athletes were fans of Gigi and Kobe as well, of course. That's the tough part about it, not getting to see her live out her dreams, because you can see the love she had for it.
Yeah. Another thing that really kept bothering me was, and I don't know how this happened. I don't know if it was a situation where it was quick, or if they had time to kind of react to the situation. But knowing Kobe, like the things that and his mentality, the things that he would say to kind of calm everyone down, and and just how did those last seconds or moments play out? And I can't help but think about how horrifying that was, and that brings me down even more just thinking about that.
This entire situation shed some light on the fallacies the media have, especially in today's 24-hour cycle media, where everyone's out to be the first. Everyone wants to be the first to get the breaking news, to get the scoop. And I didn't hear it at the time, but you mentioned that they wanted some report. I forget. I don't know what outlet said it, but some report said Rick Fox was on board. I was listening to an interview with Rick Fox. He was on NBA TV or TNT. They were doing a tribute on Tuesday, and he said he would get texts and calls from everyone. He didn't know Kobe died. He thought it was a ruse. When he found out he died, he was down, obviously. But then everyone's hitting him up. He's assuming, oh, they're trying to console me. But they're hitting him up thinking, no way, there's no way he's dead. He didn't know he was dead, quote unquote. The audacity that the news media has to write an obituary for someone that's still living, and to put their family, his immediate family and friends, in a frenzy. Kenny Smith said he was driving in a car once, and he saw it on his phone, and he almost broke down. He had to pull over the car, Rick Fox, and he said, he texted him. He said, "Just say hey." And Rick Fox obviously replied. But to put that family in turmoil for no apparent reason, but to just be first to report the news, disgusting.
Yeah, and and we discussed this already, right? The game that the media plays, like in that space, it is very. It's such a turmoil, and like there's no integrity in that space. And to your point, they don't care about the loved ones of these people. They don't care about the emotional trauma or the possible emotional trauma that they can put loved ones through. It's just a matter of being the one to break the story. And we see this even in some movies, right? There was a movie, I forget the name of it. What was it called? Nightcrawler, I think. I hated that movie because it represented everything and very well. They did a really good job of representing how the media works.
You told me an interesting question before we started the podcast. Remind us of the question you asked me before the podcast regarding celebrities or certain deaths that pulls on the strings of our hearts, especially in terms of the public.
Right. So the question was, what's the psychological reason that celebrity deaths or someone who you don't know, their death sometimes hit hard? It hit home. What's the psychological reason behind that?
And what was your thoughts on it?
I mean, as I kind of try to analyze my feelings, trying to come to grips with Kobe's passing, I think I got the answer to it. It's the not only the admiration that you have towards that person, but just the ties to certain memories or moments that they might in your life that they might have. For example, with Kobe, the moments for me was when I first started playing sports, playing basketball. I never thought I had it. Or I never thought, especially early on, I never thought I was, good. Like I saw a lot of the kids that played, and they were not obviously, but a lot of them were better than me. And just watching Kobe play, and this was before the whole Mamba mentality thing. Just watching him play, and I was like, man, he does that so well. I like the way he does it so gracefully, and it just made me want to play more. And I didn't have that mentality of never quitting, but just wanting to always be like him and do the things that he did. It just made me want to keep practicing and practicing and practicing and playing and playing and playing until obviously.
But let's talk about in general. Bring it to generality.
So, I mean, in general terms, it's just the ties to certain memories and moments that person might have to your life. So there's just, you place them in certain memories or memories in your life that makes it seem as if, even though you never really knew that person, it makes it seem like you did know them indirectly. So they do play a bit of a role, or they have an impact in your life. And in some cases, they might even be part of your identity.
There's a sense of connectedness when it comes to celebrities. More so with musicians and now you can say reality stars, but more so for me with musicians and athletes. The sense of connectedness, meaning we see them go through the trials and tribulations. We see them overcome things. We see the growth. We make that connection to our own selves. You made the connection with basketball. People make the connections in any sense of like. Most elite people like to compare themselves to elite people and measure themselves to elite people. That's why generally when you say a successful person, one athlete from one sport and another athlete from another sport, they're usually going to be fans of one another because they know what it takes to be that great. Mm-hmm. So that sense of connectedness for me, that's talking as a normal person, not an elite athlete. As a normal person, the sense of connection we have with Kobe, for me, that was the first thing. I didn't really have that sense of connection with Michael Jackson. I remember when Michael Jackson died, we had a cousin of ours that was crying. and I didn't understand it.
Neither did I.
Now I understand what. Now I understand the feelings he had. Not to cry out, not to just cry out outright, but I understand the feelings of somber. To me, there's some controversy to Michael Jackson. Some would say there's controversy to Kobe Bryant, but a little more so with Michael Jackson. So that's why I couldn't really feel him, and I just was not a fan of him musically. For musicians, I think they have more connection to the general public than anyone. Second, obviously, athletes, but musicians, they have their lyrics are, or their songs are lyrics to our lives. We can pinpoint particular bookmarks in our life, and we know there's a certain song that made us get through something. Whatever it may be, a breakup, hard times, you're struggling in life, there's a particular song that speaks to you. That's why singers, songwriters are hold in such dear terms. Michael Jackson obviously had songs to speak to all types of variety of issues, and this he gave people, I can't speak to everyone, but he gave people a sense of unity. We see that when we see concerts. We see concerts of people where everyone, it could be music, it could be in athletics and sports. Everyone comes in for the one sole purpose. You just disconnect yourself from the real world, and your sole focus is, I'm going to spend the 2.5 hours watching this basketball game, and I'm going to be emotionally invested and tied into that game. Emotionally invested. We've emotionally invested hours, hundreds of hours of our life to Kobe. Disconnect from our real world and connected emotionally to him, whether you hated him or loved him. He was a very polarizing player. That sense of connection we had, it's unique. It's unique. It's like no other. And I'm proud of the media. We said one bad thing about the media, but I'm proud of the media that it really showcased one of our heroes, the heroes of this time. It shows the importance of athletes, what impact athletes have in our lives. And I'm happy that everyone can really celebrate Kobe Bryant to the max. I'm just hoping that we keep him in our minds and not just forget him in a week or so.
For sure. Two things actually.
I was thinking,
I wanted before you moved on, I wanted to make a comment. So I don't want to give the media too much credit because I think they were just kind of
for sure
off of
but
the reactions of the public, of the general public towards Kobe.
Sometimes you take the good with the bad. So obviously they're gonna bite up all that for the ratings, of course. But you take that bad and you take the good with that as well. You take the good and you can just forget about the politics and you can say, you know what, I'm just gonna serenade my favorite player or an athlete I grew up with.
Right.
And just forget about, obviously they're still gonna capitalize on that, but we can as a society for this 1 week at least just serenade our athlete.
Yeah.
Our king.
Right. And I also want to add on to what you mentioned about Kobe. It's more than, being able to be kind of growing up with him. I think it's also what he stood for. We talk about all the time how most people want to see that person or that person go through the trials and tribulations, go through the struggles and come out on top. Most people want to see someone working hard, put in the hard work in order to come out on top. And he embodied all of that. He embodied it, he embraced it, and he encouraged it. And it wasn't just a front. I think a lot of people saw that, and I think it inspired people. And that's more so, in my opinion, how he's gotten so many people's respect. Because I think a lot of people may like other athletes more than Kobe, but the respect that he took essentially, that's really what stands out between Kobe and the next superstar in any any walks of life, whether it's sports, music, movies, politics, whatever.
He worked like he was an untalented athlete trying to make the team. And LeBron carried that torch. It was always a thing, especially growing up, where the most talented athlete generally didn't work the hardest.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, he rested on the laurels of his God-given talent.
Yeah, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said you actually you saw that firsthand while you were in high school playing football.
Oh, for sure. Anybody could make note of that for sure. But he worked like he was trying to make the team. He worked harder than most people can fathom. And that gave everyone a sense of respect. All athletes. Some athletes would start by thinking, man, it's a front. They come to that conclusion that's based on their mentality and how they feel about themselves. Maybe they feel like they can work harder. And you see a guy that's working extra hard. Yeah, you get a little envious of him. But then we see, no, this is, once he gave it a title, it gave new reverence to what it meant to work hard. And like I said, LeBron James took it to a different level as well. And now the influence of athletes is apparent. Athletes now are training harder than ever. And we're seeing a greater output. I wanted to dive back into the 90s, late 80s, early 90s. Mm-hmm. So the kids of Michael Jordan, so to speak.
Yeah.
Growing up in the late 80s and 90s, obviously I was not growing up in the 80s, but we know the commercials. Like Mike. Want to be like Mike. So that grew at least 2-3 decades of athletes. Everyone wanted to be like Mike. From Harold Miner, Jerry Stackhouse, Kobe Bryant, Vince Carter, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade. Everyone wanted to be like Mike. His number, the way he played, the swagger he had. This generation, it's not like Mike anymore. It is also going to be like Mike, but it's Mamba mentality. That's the imprint he had. We've shifted from like Mike to Mamba mentality. That's going to be a common vernacular used by athletes and the upcoming generations. The Mamba mentality.
Definitely. That's a good observation. Yeah, definitely. And I didn't even think that deep about it, but
that's the greatest thing you can. That's the greatest thing you can ask for someone that has influence. Knowing that you're influencing the future. People that you may not even be in contact with are being influenced. We see it from the athletes that are showing their true raw emotions. That this is the guy I looked up to. I didn't grow up watching Michael Jordan. Paul George said this, and Devin Booker. I grew up watching Kobe. I wanted to be like Kobe. And you're planting seeds. The most important thing of a particular anyone that's great. Plant your seeds. Mm-hmm. That's where you see the true greatness in what you do.
And this is no slight at Michael Jordan at all, because it's not like he, made the commercial, nor did he come up with the slogan. But the slogan, like Mike, doesn't do much for people, because like Mike, that Michael Jordan is great, but you're not seeing the work that he had to put in to get there. It's just, get to the top of the mountain and forget what happens in between. But the Mamba mentality, it embodies the work that it takes to get there. It's essentially sacrificing and doing whatever it takes to get to the goal. Basically, get to the goal by any means necessary.
I can see that. I'm not going to tear someone down to bring somebody else up, but I can see that. I can see that observation.
No, it's not a teardown. Like I said, I know Michael Jordan didn't come up with the commercial, nor did he come up with the slogan. I'm just making a
No, the slogan
comparison.
was great though. The slogan was great. Of course, it didn't give us the details of how to be great, but it gave everyone something to strive for. It gave generations and generations, like I said, 3 decades of generations at least, and I'm pretty sure it's still going to go on 1,000% of what to look up to and strive for. Without that marker or that benchmark to look up to and try to catch, goals are tough to reach. You're just aimlessly living or doing.
Right, and it is so easy to, especially if you don't have some type of intrinsic motivation. It's so easy to lose sight of the goal. And having something like the Mamba mentality slogan, it sticks, it connects, it gives you it gives you something to reach out to and hold on to when when maybe you don't want to continue on.
This is the first time I felt this type of reaction. The second time, but yeah, I didn't expect it to happen. But that goes. I really. This is. I guess I'm trying to gather up my thoughts. I think why I felt the way I did was he had so much more to give,
Yeah,
and it was cut short.
yeah.
The
I do
worst,
feel
the
a little
worst
rough.
deaths, the worst deaths are tragedies. We can accept death when death comes, but when it's a tragic death, car accident, John Lennon gets shot by a fan. I think it's John Lennon, or some, maybe forgetting. I forget which Beatle, but gets walking in the street and gets shot by a fan.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the biggest ones of the yester nations. In a helicopter crash, another tragic one. Tragic events hit us even deeper for some reason. Because for tragedies, we all know that it can be avoided. We say, what if he didn't go out this day, and what if he, and then we just can't come up with any answers, and none of those answers matter. Tragedies they cut deep.
Yeah,
They cut deep.
and you know what, this situation made me. It made me pay attention to my emotions a little more, because I haven't felt, again, especially for someone who I don't know, I haven't felt so down about something like this, with someone who I don't know before. So it forced.
But we know him, and we know what he means to the community at whole, the nation at whole. We know the love, all the emotions he brought to us. We need these important figures. That showed me why it's so important for these figures to be so public and visible. It showed the strength in these figures as well, and obviously the influence he had is paramount. But it really told me, okay, yeah, we do need these public figures. These public figures represent the community at whole, whatever community they represent, and we basically live through them vicariously.
Agreed. And one thing I will say is Kobe used that influence responsibly. Whether he did it inadvertently or not, or subconsciously or not, he used it very very responsibly, in the sense that he was just able to inspire not only our generation. I think he even inspired the older generation, the Michael Jordan generation. And
He inspired the
my
current generation of players.
I think he
So
inspired
it's
the older
big.
generation as well.
I'm not sure what you mean by that, but the biggest compliment you can get is not when the young the youth look up to you, but when your peers look up to you,
right? And that's what I mean by
you
the
see
older
you
generation.
and you can. I'm not sure what you mean by that, but when as it relates to peers, I mean players he played with and players that are playing right now. Really sheds light into the influence he had. What do you mean by the older generation, though?
I mean, even people his age who aren't playing basketball, people who are older than him, who aren't playing basketball. I mean, literally, there are people who didn't even know of him
I thought
playing
you meant
basketball.
I thought you meant the older
No,
athletes.
no, no, no. I mean, people in general. There are
Yeah,
people.
for sure, for sure.
There are people who didn't know him, who didn't follow basketball when they heard of the news. Not just the news, when they heard of who he was, the things that he did, the tragic situation, they
That's the word right
they
there.
said they
Tragedy.
said they
Any
cried.
tragedy.
Yeah,
Any tragedy, especially when there's a youth involved, any tragedy is going to tug at our emotions. Whether you know the person or not, it's always going to tug at our emotions. That's what tragedy does.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah, he had so much more to give. He was working on his media content game. He won an Emmy last year or so, and he was working on so much more bigger things where he may have been just as big off the field, off the court, pardon, than he was on the court. And Gigi had so much more to give as well. She could have influenced so many more. She still is, but she could have, with her career, influenced so many more girls. The way she took basketball as serious as she did, and Kobe did mention that she does has a Mamba mentality when it comes to playing sports.
right.
She could have influenced so many more girls. Just being that public woman that she is, coming from the Kobe Bryant tree, and she was planning on going to UConn and obviously WNBA. Those two together, what they would have done for women athletics, what they've already done, what they would have done in the future, would have been paramount, gigantic.
One can only imagine. But I don't want to stay too somber, too sad. I want to, I guess, more so celebrate his life, the inspiration that he was, the star that in the making that G.
The worst thing is,
or is
the worst thing is for me, especially what made me even feel more sad, was how Vanessa is going to deal with it, and the eldest Natalia is dealing with it right now. They're suddenly losing your dad, your husband, and your sister, daughter. That's the toughest part for me when I try to vicariously think of or empathize with their emotions. That was the toughest thing to deal with. Yeah, now they're all on their own. Very tough and abruptly. I'm pretty sure they literally just saw them as they left the house. Very tough and tragic for them. Hopefully we the public and let them mourn in peace, and whenever they're ready to speak, let them speak.
Yeah.
Don't badger them.
I know for,
When they're on public, don't remind them. I think I heard Shannon Sharp say this. Don't remind them of their grief while they're in public. Let them grieve on their own time. Don't say, "Oh, I'm sorry for your loss" when you see them. That's just poking the puncture wound that's already there.
I know Vanessa did put a post. It was all over, all the news outlets, all the social media, not the news outlets, but all the social media was all over it, saying that Vanessa posted her first comment since the tragedy. And she essentially asked for that. She thanked everyone for their support and just asked for the privacy to allow her family to grieve. And just give her and her family the privacy and time that they need, and as long as they need to grieve and to come to grips.
Rest in peace to the 9 victims.